was it the Mel Brooks? What is it? The producers? Anyway, that we're putting on a production here. Show business. There's no business like show business, and the show must always go on, even though Cecil Lammey is on assignment. Although he may show up later. Hey, everybody! It's Thursday night. There's no game for us to compete with now, so let's talk some football. It's week 16. We are there for all of you. We're there for ourselves too. We're experiencing, Gene, what are you in 3 finals?
Yeah, how about that?
Has that? I mean, when was the last time you were in 3 fantasy football finals in the same season?
I don't know. It's been a couple years, probably.
Yeah, I'm not in
We'll
3. I'm only in 2.
I'm
So
only in 1.
Ooh.
there you go. The crown.
Y'all
Dr.
would have
Gene.
lost a lot of money betting on me against the 3 of these boys at the beginning of the year.
So every decision is under the microscope. Everything's under the microscope, and we're going to do the best we can to help you. Of course, Saturday games this week. Make sure you have your lineup set. Complicates decisions a little bit. Always complicating decisions, injuries, and let's just dive right in, Doc. I think the biggest one this week is Dak Prescott. I think because it implicates so many other players, and because at least to me, Dr. Gene, at first glance, I don't just want to brush it off. I hear things like what one of the players said. Well, he was automatically doing the run on the run pass options, and he had an MRI. I think Ezekiel Elliott said something like, "I can't imagine playing with AC joint." I think came up. I don't know how much of this we can count on. Dallas is very loose-lipped about the state of their most important player. What comes out of your lips, Dr. Gene?
Well, I am compelled by Dak Prescott's optimism and the fact that all his teammates suggest that he's going to play and that he's tough enough to do so. I am not compelled at all by the fact that he would not throw the ball to one side of the field on the RPO or otherwise, and he's had an MRI and he's not thrown the ball yet. They're allowing him to talk to the media. I don't get the sense that this is smoke and mirrors. I do get the sense that he's likely to play, how effective he's going to be, his ability to finish the game. Shooting up a quarterback's throwing shoulder is probably not an option, in the same way that Josh Jacobs and James Conner and other guys have probably with shoulder situations. And again, those are different situations, but I don't know. I think this is going to go down through the weekend. If he's not throwing tomorrow, then I think we have to be pretty concerned about his availability. But I think your comment about what's this mean for his entire surrounding cast is more important right now than him himself. I don't know that anybody was necessarily planning on using him. I know that he's gotten you there over the last couple of weeks through the fantasy playoffs anyhow, but Amari Cooper, Ezekiel Elliott, if you're planning on using Jason Witten, if you're hopeful for Michael Gallup as a streaming type option, I don't have a very good feeling about the offense in general, unless you're going to lean heavily on Ezekiel Elliott and you feel like, well, they're probably going to give him 30 touches because Prescott really can't throw the ball.
So, Gene, what about Kerryon Johnson? A couple weeks ago, he was taken off injured reserve. There was some practice going on, possibly, or some activity. Can you detail that activity and whether or not that's going to translate to the potential for playing time?
Yeah, I didn't really like the tone of the comments today that suggested that the Lions may not use him. I think the idea was to bring him back. Bo Scarborough should be a little bit closer to returning from a rib injury. He's at least practiced a couple of consecutive days, which is in contrast to what happened last week when he went on Wednesday, and then they shut him down for the rest of the week. I think if Johnson is healthy enough, then you'll likely see him out there, but this is not going to be a situation where you expect him to get 15-plus effective touches. And similar to last year when he tried to recover from a knee injury and they ended up shutting him down, maybe they decide, we've put you through 3 weeks of practice, you're not quite ready yet, and we're not going to put you out there in harm's way again. This sounds like, I think I heard it described as a ligament injury. So, if there's any question at all, I don't think he's going to play. There's not a lot of incentive in it. We're not conditioning for next year. They know what they have in him. Matthew Stafford isn't out there. They've got some offensive line issues. So unless he fully practices and they feel very confident with him coming back, then he's another player that I think you get limited duty out of his best. And, the bigger issue is going to be how the rest of that offense functions.
Hasn't Johnson been practicing for a couple of weeks now?
Yes, but how much we don't know because he's not been on the practice participation report. And I was assuming that everything was lined up for him to play in week 16. And then the comment today from Johnson was, it's not up to me. I'll play if they let me to. So, just those comments, sometimes it's just, whatever from a player. But those always make me leery because it makes you feel like the player may be saying, I want to play, and the team is already saying, well, I don't know if we're going to activate you. And he knows that going into this week. So, the tone of the comments wasn't, I'm ready to go, I'm going to be back this weekend, and here we go. That's not what we're hearing on Thursday. So what's going to change on Friday through the weekend? Maybe we'll hear something more positive. Maybe that's the tone of the reports we'll get out of him on Friday after practice, but that's not what we're hearing so far. And through 2.5 weeks of practice, with Scarborough not being able to go for a couple of weeks with a rib injury, you'd think that Johnson would be there saying, I'm going to play and I'm ready to go. And that's not what we're hearing.
Yeah, I'm just fascinated by the idea of Kerryon Johnson with fresh legs against a defense in week 16. But you're right. You're right that there's some cold water on that. Not cold water, steamy. Mike Boone. Waldman, we'll talk about Mike Boone. But just the side of the equation of, will Alexander Madison or Dalvin Cook figure into the backfield Monday night? Because you got to make decisions on well, there. Okay.
Nope. They pretty much already ruled out Dalvin Cook. It's not clear exactly what's going on when he fell onto that elbow. It makes you think about rotator cuff situations. He briefly held his arm like you thought maybe his shoulder came out of place. They're listing it as a chest again on the injury report this week, which I thought was interesting because it had all the looks of a shoulder situation, and it's the opposite side from the SC thing he had before. They're shutting him down until the playoffs. Alexander Madison, we talked about this in Monday's article. When I went back and looked at the video on Saturday and Sunday, he's got a high ankle sprain, hasn't been back to practice yet. Maybe he gets a limited Thursday and Friday practice, but that's not likely to happen. There are a couple of other guys on the roster, and this isn't a situation. I think I got kind of fooled when I wrote on Monday that, if they add a guy from the practice squad, you'd be a little bit more nervous. But that 5 guys on the active roster, Amir Abdul and otherwise, and they've got some guys. Mike Boone looked great. So, what's the incentive for Madison to play and potentially tweak an ankle that keeps him out of a wild card game or otherwise? Not high. So I don't think either one of those guys are playing. I think it's all Mike Boone all the time, and you hope he stays healthy enough to be productive in the same way he was in the second half last week.
So first, I have 2 questions. First part's not so serious, but I just wondered, when you played baseball, when you first started playing baseball, Gene, did your coach teach you to swing on the first pitch?
No, I think what we were told was to be selectively aggressive. I think more often than not, it kind of aggravated me. Baseball coaches out there, don't get too mad at me. This whole, take until you get a strike stuff when you're behind always made me a little bit. So I want people to be, so we teach our boys and our kids, I want you aggressive on the first good pitch you see because you're ready all the time, especially in some of the lower levels where you're not sure what you're going to get after that anyway. So, no, I mean, not always. I was selectively aggressive as
it shows.
Oxymoronish.
That's what I liked. I liked it. It shows. It definitely does. I just thought about it. And I was like, yeah, he probably swung away at the first pitch.
Yeah.
That he saw. So there you go. All right. So in terms of all the possible selections that we have with some of these players here, is there anybody that you're really concerned about in week 16 that you feel like for those, that's really going to be relevant from a fantasy perspective that we haven't talked about right away?
Julian Edelman, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Gerald Everett coming back and putting a big old set of brakes on Tyler Higbee's past 3 weeks. Probably. What are we going to get out of Juju Smith-Schuster? I think the full practice on Thursday is pretty reassuring that he's been able to do back-to-back things. But I would suppose that the big one is Julian Edelman kind of limping around a little bit. Did they limit his snaps last week because it was the Bengals and they got out to a lead by the second half and he didn't need to be out there? Or is it finally where shoulder and knee in particular are just proving to be too much? And if they can, depending on what the bye week situation is for them coming into the playoffs, you may not see much out of him. I don't think we'd be seeing much out of him if Tom Brady had any other option at all. Those guys have been so inconsistent around him, including the running game. You have to have somebody that moves the chains. So I think he's my highest concern of a player that we've seen on the injury report for a while who's taken usual heavy usage on Sunday and then did not last week and didn't look good doing so. Still doesn't look like he's moving well in the practice video we're seeing. So he's going to play. He's going to tough it out, but this is not something that is easy to manage on game day. So, he runs the type of routes that probably going to be able to get away with, especially if you're in a PPR league, target counts and otherwise. But, the 10, 130 with or without a touchdown is probably not within the range of expectation, except in a very high sliver on the far end of the bell curve right now.
Gee, what about Derrick Henry? And I mean, you got the match. I mean, look, just from the larger fantasy perspective, the matchup's not great, and Tennessee might be running out a little bit of gas. But just from the perspective of your area of expertise here, we know he's playing with a hamstring injury. If he underperforms, he did get stuffed at the goal line a couple of times, some of his game scripts last week, but we know he's playing with this injury. For folks that do have a close tie to break with Derrick Henry is part of it, because he's not a lock the way he was, say, 2 or 3 weeks ago. He's not a lineup lock because of this injury.
I guess.
Or not.
What's your close decision, I guess? Because we know it's been 3 weeks. Last week, even though he didn't practice a single rep, he still got over 20 touches. Dion Lewis is now on the injury report with an ankle injury. Who knows what that means? But he's really not been cutting into those things except towards the end of games. If you think Tennessee's going to be well behind, then I think you have to be worried about him a little bit. I don't know how likely that is in the range of expectation. And yeah, we're a month into this hamstring strain. Henry's going to play. He said he's going to do everything he can on the field unless his leg falls off. We know that's not happened yet. So my big concern would be, does the game script go to where Tennessee's down a couple of touchdowns early and we see?
Could this be deteriorating over? I mean, like, I know that Henry is doing everything he can to summon up all of his energy, but like behind the scenes, like, does the math work that this just stays in a steady state of damage? Like, how can it be no less damage than it was 2 or 3 weeks ago?
Well, I don't think we've seen him. We don't have next gen stats. At least I don't have access to those things to know what his top speed is necessarily. But he's not going to break a 55-yard carry. What you're hoping is, 20 carries for 100 yards and maybe a 15 or 20-yarder in there, and that they get enough usage around the goal line where we don't see him stuffed, and then, Tannehill running a read option around the end, or them flipping to a tight end in the end zone after he's missed a couple of chances. But I haven't looked at it closely enough to know. I have Derrick Henry in one league, and the options there, if I don't go that route, is going to be not great. So if you're stacked up enough to where you feel like somebody else on the bench is going to get a 20 touch expectation on all the goal line work, I don't know. Who's Tennessee have this week? Who are they playing?
New Orleans. No, but here, Gene, I'll give you some names.
I see where you're going now. So
I'm not. And look, and you gave us. Sorry, Matt, because this is week 16. This is week 16, and we're trying to give people the best information here. You did say something just as part of what you were putting out there, that Derrick Henry's not going to break long runs now. I mean, that's a material change to his outlook. I'm not saying it's a material enough change to knock him out of starting consideration, but some of the players, I think, that weren't drafted ahead of Derrick Henry that you might think about playing over him this week: Austin Eckler, for sure, Miles Sanders, Mark Ingram. And then where it gets trickier, I think Aaron Jones at this point. I mean, I know Aaron Jones has a low floor too, but I mean, it just...
Well, I think your baseline expectation is that game home or away?
Away. It's home. It's home. It's outside.
So I would think that the way you're going to beat New Orleans is to try to control the clock and give his as many carries as possible. So I think even in a situation where they find themselves down early, you're probably going to get 15 or so touches and goal line work from him. So if you are convinced that Aaron Jones is going to get over Jamal Williams, those sorts of things. Miles Sanders, I can see, and otherwise. But I think you're putting a talented running back on the bench who they are going to use, except if they are behind multiple touchdowns and they're doing what they need to do there. So I don't know. I think we'll have a little bit better idea as we get tomorrow. I feel pretty good about the fact that Henry's at least practicing on Wednesday. They gave him the day off on Thursday, but those things are, I think it's going to be a game script question, and then you decide, what's the likelihood that he's going to be in a situation where he only gets 12 to 15 touches and they're not around the goal line enough for him to make a difference.
Yeah, I'm kind of more in the camp that those other running backs better have a good and likely ceiling, and I think that some of the guys you mentioned absolutely fit that. Some of those guys are debatable, but again, they're in the realm. So it's very reasonable to ask that. This may be an unreasonable question to ask you, but I think it's one that may be helpful to fantasy players, even if it takes a little bit of time to look at. And we have Bloom maybe ask you another question and look at it. But are there any offensive lines that you're concerned about in terms of how banged up they are, that no matter how good the running back is, that you may be a little worried about how that running back performs, or how the quarterback is able to stay in the pocket and be able to deliver the ball?
Yeah, let me scroll through here and see what we got. I did not update my database on the injuries for offensive line guys today. What I had a little bit of concern about yesterday is that pretty much every New Orleans offensive lineman is on the injury report. I'm not worried about any of them. And in fact, they might even get Andrus Peat back this week. Larry Warford's going to be gone. So if you don't have Peat, you don't have Warford. And Armstead is still kind of banged up with the ankle. And now we're even worried about, backup guards as well, then maybe that's something that we're going to have to be concerned about. Ramchik's on the injury report with a knee as well. I'm expecting all of these guys to play. I'm not sure exactly whether Pete's going to be ready or not. Warford is probably not going to be. So that's one line you probably have to pay a little bit closer attention to. Ronnie Stanley looks like he's going to be back after his concussion, so I think you're going to be okay there. Oakland has been an issue, but Josh Jacobs is not going to be there to worry about, and that passing offense is probably not one that you're going to be relying on either. Kansas City looks like it's going to be healthy. Andrew Wiley's not practiced earlier in the week, but that's been the case for the last couple of weeks. Cleveland's got a couple of guys. J.C. Treader has not been practicing for a couple of weeks, and he's playing. Chris Hubbard was back from a knee injury. They're banged up a little bit more. Atlanta has lost some offensive linemen recently. James Carpenter looks like he's going to be back from a concussion, but until we see him fully practice, it's hard to put that up there. Oakland's, as we mentioned with Trent Brown, all those guys have been beat up, but they've been playing through it. So I think the one I was watching most carefully was the New Orleans line in general. And then, Cam Robinson, Brandon Linder. Are you worried about Leonard Fournette a little bit with those guys? They've got a few guys on the injury report, things to be mindful of. Saquon Barkley had a good week despite not having Kevin Zeitler there last week, and Zeitler's got a good chance of coming back this week. So nothing in particular. So Cleveland in particular. So
no, Kevin Zeitler, is he coming back to Cleveland? Can we get him back to Cleveland? Can we make that trade over again?
I think they probably would like that, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So I think watch New Orleans. All the Dallas guys are on the injury report again, but it's probably not going to be an issue. That's going to be a Dak Prescott thing, as we talked about. So I'm not anticipating any big issues offensive line wise. But if Ramchik's more injured than I thought, and Pete isn't coming back, and they're not going to have Warford, if there's a chance that New Orleans is down 3 linemen, despite Drew Brees' best efforts at avoiding pressure in the pocket, that could be a little bit of a problem. If Tennessee's front seven can do something there.
Well, if I can just add a couple of things onto that I think are worthwhile, just from what you mentioned. As someone who, since I do the write-ups for Atlanta every week for football guys, if Shaq Barrett, they're playing Tampa this week, right? So
Atlanta,
are they playing Tampa?
They're playing Jacksonville.
They're playing Jacksonville, even more so. So you've got Ngakoue and going up against even their best guys, Jake Matthews, who tends to let give up sacks and tends to have some issues. And Ngakoue looked unstoppable last week with his speed rushes. I just think that this is a situation where Matt Ryan it's kind of under the radar. I mean, very good player still and very tough, but once he starts to get pressure, he just starts throwing the ball to the ground and hitting the ground and saying, I'm not dealing with this mess. We'll wait till next year. It's not worth it. And it's smart, but it's like, you understand, without Calvin Ridley, with Julio Jones, with guys who he doesn't quite trust, and Matt Ryan is very big on whether you trust guys or not. I'd be a little more concerned about Matt Ryan this week without those offensive line, and it's not something where I'd be starting unknowns over Matt Ryan, but I think instead of him being, he might be in that range where you're looking at the low end quarterback ones, high end quarterback twos, who maybe not, you might not normally just say automatically you'd start.
Yeah, Matt. I mean, I have Ryan Fitzpatrick over Matt Ryan. I have Kyler Murray over Matt Ryan. Carson Wentz over Matt Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, there's some thought there that there's some legit.
He's like quarterback 13 or so. Yeah, so I'm with you. I would. The picture in my head, Matt, and this is going to date me, but y'all get it. At least you two. It's like I always think of Matt Ryan as like Gumby, but when he's under pressure, he turns into Mr. Bill. Remember Mr. Bill?
Pretty much.
Oh no.
Yeah. I mean, well, he's taken so many hits. He's taken so many hits and been Gumby like. It's surprising that he hasn't broken an ankle or shredded his knee. But you started seeing it. I think it was when Ndamukong Suh just first came to Miami and they played. It was before they made all these late trades to revamp their line. And in the preseason game, he was like Jeff George in it. Yeah. Like, it was crazy. But the only other one I would add is, if you do, there are a lot of people who may be thinking about DeAndre Washington as a starter. And I still think that he'd be a not bad play, even with the Raiders line, just because of the fact that they will run draws with him. They will use him in the passing game some, and you're not expecting huge production from him if you're starting him anyway. You're just hoping for a baseline of points.
Gene, how long has it been since you thought about Mr. Bill?
It's been a few years.
It's a great reference.
Yeah. Look it up,
that's
folks.
awesome.
Okay.
Send you down
Who's
a YouTube
Sluggo?
wormhole.
So then Yannick is Sluggo?
Yeah.
Or is it Calais Campbell?
Pull one arm off at a time. Yep.
Exactly. That's what that.
We're going to throw the book at
Ryan.
him. Yeah.
So
Just a
okay,
flesh
Gene.
wound.
Exactly. Sunday, we will check in on all this stuff again. But I'm going to just pepper you with some players to just give us your feelings on as of right now. And then we'll check in Sunday morning with y'all. We'll have some games in the books. And then good luck. And then I want one other question to you after this. Okay. Joe Mixon, calf, anything to worry about there?
I don't think so.
Okay. If DJ Chark plays, how is he like full intensity? You think about him the way you did like 3 or 4 weeks ago, or pause?
I'd probably pause a little bit. I was a little bit surprised to hear that he was already practicing. I kind of took we're going to allow him to run and cut a little bit as we want him to start reconditioning. And I wasn't expecting him to get a limited practice and then another limited practice and maybe even more as we go into the weekend. So if he fully practices and we hear some positivity, then maybe we'll be okay. But I still feel like it's not likely from a high ankle sprain that puts you on a scooter in a walking boot 2 weeks ago to going to playing a couple weeks later seems like a stretch.
Will Fuller, is it at all hesitation with him because he won't get out of limited, questionable?
Yeah, I mean, looked okay last weekend, so hopefully that week off did him good. He had plenty of snaps and more targets. He had 7 targets on 50 some odd snaps, so that's about as reassuring as you can get. And you watch for overnight reports that say he's a little bit more banged up than expected, but out of the last 8 weeks or so with this, there's only been 1 week where they've decided he's not been able to play, and it was a week after he didn't really have that many snaps and touches, so should be good to go, I would think.
Last one, Christian Kirk. I feel like Christian Kirk continues to get on that 3 touchdown game he had. I mean, what's going on with him? This is a player that actually is going to be right on the fence for a lot of people.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to have to go back and look at that a little bit. I didn't see much indication that he was limited last game, at least by snap count or otherwise. So you hope maybe there that it's a little bit of tweak and it was some maintenance and we're going to see a DNP limited full and he's going to be off the game status report and fine. But I want to see if there's anything in last week's game that suggests that there was an injury of concern there. He did kind of limp off the field a little bit from my reading, but I didn't look at the game specifically to see what may have happened. So I'll have a better idea on Sunday whether or not that's something we need to be concerned about. But for now, I'm hopeful that we get a little bit more practice participation. There's not much of a concern.
Okay. Is there anyone you have a question about for us or for the chat room if you don't trust us?
Trust you? Ask the chat room? No, like I said, I haven't done a lot of my weekend prep work yet. I'm going to have a few close decisions that maybe we can discuss on the weekend. Yeah. I'm at the back end of the roster, and I'm going to be right back where I was with Mahomes versus Jackson versus Breeze versus Wilson this week. And it will not surprise me right now. I guess I did look at the quarterbacks already. I might play Wilson over Mahomes. I don't think I'm going to play Breeze over Mahomes.
How much do you like Kyler Murray? The more you like Kyler Murray, the more you like Russell Wilson this week.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I am. I'm at this point. I love Patrick Mahomes, but where's the
Chicago
upside and where's
numbers haven't been there because where's the beef lately with him?
And it's Russell Wilson, so I don't think I'm going to play Breeze over Mahomes this week. But I'll have some interesting ones for you this week.
Yeah, no, it's good. Always interesting and always enlightening to talk to Dr. Gene, doing the work for us for years. That really and truly, Gene, and I know sometimes I make you blush. There's like how we handled injuries in fantasy football before you started doing what you did, because there's been a lot of people that have followed you and done the kind of work that really came naturally to you. You've invented a discipline almost, and we're lucky to get to pick your brain every week on the Audible. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Always make it awkward. Yeah, but it ain't weird unless you make it weird, right?
That's right, and you like to make it weird. So
is that weird? Really? Is it weird to say to tell someone in a moment, because it's our holiday show? I got Cajun Santa
Yeah.
Claus.
No,
here.
I don't think it's odd to compliment anyone who deserves it, like Jene Bramel, and
Yeah,
he most
exactly.
deserves it. But I think, when he hears you invented the profession, I think that's when his literal mind gets
I
a
know.
little bit
I
too
know. Well, and
in
it's just like I
overdrive
go a
there.
little bit. I go
Yeah.
overboard. That's what I do.
Yeah.
That's what I do. Okay, we've got about half an hour, and we'll be back Sunday morning, and we have all of our work. I hope we read the top 10 every week. I know I do,
Oh,
and so on. And RSP's coming. You've got to get a piece of that. So, folks in the chat room, and I know that I've been trying to answer some questions as we've been going, but if there's specific players or specific questions that you've got, we'll try to weave that in
yeah.
as we're talking about this, and we will touch on these players on Sunday morning also. But I guess, Matt, because of the Sunday morning actually leaving out 3 games this week, let's talk about Saturday. Okay, Buffalo, New England. I feel like this is just a stay away game. Like, I mean, everybody's diminished in this game except for maybe Devin Singletary, just because he's playing so well. I mean, Devin Singletary's still a solid running back too. John Brown's going to get Stephon Gilmore, Cole Beasley. I mean, the Bills' offense should be better than it was last time around, week 4, but I don't know if it's going to be that much better. And on the New England side, I mean, this is one of the worst offenses in the league, and Buffalo's no pushover. And like Gene was saying, Julian Edelman, I have hesitation about him. I almost feel like ideally you're not playing anybody. Maybe James White in a PPR league.
Oh yeah. That's the only guy that I think you might look at the situation and go, am I crazy not to start him? Is James White. I think that's the guy you probably want to look at. And also Buffalo seems to have some issues against the screenplay, and they've given up some yardage in passing plays to running backs specifically on screenplays. So he's probably your safest bet of the Patriots. And then after that, it's going to be a total crapshoot. And if you're going to, I would probably say for most fantasy analysts, if you're going to ask a fantasy analyst about a New England Patriot player other than James White, understand that you probably have as good of a bead on him than anybody else if you're asking about him and you have had him on your roster and have been following him. So I would recommend you in this situation to go with what you know, because I look at all these guys and think, yes, 1 or 2 of them are bound to do something for you, but who's that going to be?
Yeah.
And then you're right about Singletary. I think Singletary's a solid play for you, and you probably go with he or Gore, and with him. And then if Gore would be a long shot type of play, but one that would be a reasonable one that you might choose in a real desperation situation.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a extreme long shot. So those 2 are it.
And then we have Houston and Tampa. And by the way, just touching on Buffalo, New England real quick, the part that throws you for a loop that you've had to update here in 2019 is that the Patriots are a limiting factor for the players on their team. We used to think of the Patriots as a growth factor for fantasy prospects. They're a limiting factor now. Houston, Tampa, that's not a limiting factor game at all.
No, it's a fantastic game. And I think that, you've got a complete wild man in terms of how he plays the game, and Jameis Winston, who, is going to support a lot of different players. And now Brashad Perriman's become the type of fantasy starter that people hoped he'd become, earlier in his career. I don't know if that's sustainable. He's still dropping a lot of passes, but he's a guy that's going to get a lot of looks. And that's a great thing for him. OJ Howard and Cameron Brate. I mean, Winston said, I'm coming to you guys. And I don't think there's any reason why that's just, smoke. I think that's going to happen. And then of course, you look at Hopkins, if Will Fuller plays, that's a nice look right there. Carlos Hyde's been playing well, even though Tampa's got a pretty darn good rushing defense still. I mean, you may be considering him as a flex at this point. And of course, the 2 quarterbacks in themselves, I mean, I think they're must starts.
And in that Houston game, I mean, what I'll add is Kenny Stills is a good Hail Mary.
Yes.
It's Tampa's defense. He scored twice last week. What's nice about this game, too, is Jameis Winston, the wild man, is going to encourage Deshaun Watson. I mean, this game could get in an upward spiral of scoring where the defenses just get worse and worse, and the quarterbacks just keep, having fun out there. That's why Fuller's interesting, even with the hamstring.
Should we just call Jameis the firebug?
Seriously, the arsonist.
Yeah.
Exactly.
He's like Donald Sutherland in
Prometheus.
That, yeah. Lord.
He's the Prometheus of football.
I've named my car Prometheus. There we go.
And Winston, I mean, I guess so. This is like fantasy football analyst psychology, Matt.
Oh boy, we really need a couch now.
Because when I heard that James Winston was playing with contraption on his throwing hand, that doesn't sound good.
No.
He wasn't even throwing. He had nothing in his hands Wednesday, a tennis ball Thursday, and also Jameis Winston just seemed to be. It's wild because it cuts both ways. Like he's crazy enough to play with something that he really shouldn't play with, but then he's also crazy enough to just be oblivious to it and just play as if his hand is still working fine.
You were right about that last week when you mentioned
but
that.
I didn't.
I thought you were nuts. I really
fantasy advice was not to play Jameis Winston or to depend on Jameis Winston except for Chris Godwin. And obviously, so here's the psychology part of it is now I'm like, I don't want to tell anyone to bench Jameis Winston now. But it's materially different in so much as he doesn't have Godwin and Houston's not Detroit. I mean, Detroit's just sleepwalking. There's ghosts out there. Although it's so funny, like Jacksonville, I think gets the dead cat bounce. Like they're all walking on air because Tom Coughlin got fired. You can just tell there's a weight lifted from everybody in the building. And Detroit, it's like the weight got heavier. Anyway, what about Jameis? More importantly, what about, because I agree with you, with OJ Howard and Cameron Brate. Like if you're looking at your names at tight end, and where it becomes hard is if you have Cameron Brate or OJ Howard and someone like Jacob Hollister, where you're playing it because of the matchup and the potential for, I called it a munchkin shootout, and they thought that, they were like, is that? And I said, what, Oompa Loompas? Is that better? It's because the idea of of Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray having a shootout on an NFL field, it's kind of mind-blowing, right? Anyway, so what about Perryman? What about Jameis Winston this week?
Well, I mean, I think you can look at it, instead of 450-yard upside, then, I think still 320 yards is probably a good ceiling, and that's still worthwhile. Still a couple of touchdowns. They're still going to have to keep up with that Houston offense. And I think that, they're going to be doing some different things that Houston may not be prepared for just because of the fact they don't have the personnel that shows up on film. So as we already saw from Romeo Crennel, I only look, like most defensive coordinators do. I'm making fun of them, but I'm really making fun of all defensive coordinators, which is, well, we're going to be playing against Drew Lock, so let's not look at any Missouri tape that our scouts might have or get any scouting reports about his tendencies. Let's just look at the first game, and see what happens there. So, I mean, they might be doing the same thing, which is, well, let's look at the past 3 weeks worth of tape, and OJ Howard doesn't show up as well on that, or Cameron Brate doesn't show up at all. Let's not look back at previous tape where, Cameron Brate was the best, one of the better tight ends in the league in terms of being a receiving tight end. So, I mean, I think you're going to get your deep shots to Perriman, and he's going to give you some boom bust upside. But I think he'll also get some, short screen passes, some crossing routes, probably some comebacks and out routes, those types of plays. But the volume is probably going to be where Gene kind of mentioned, or where you may have mentioned, it's not going to be like double digit type of volume, but I think it'll be somewhere between 6 to 8 targets. And I think then you look at Brate and Howard, and they're going to get the bulk of the work, if you ask me, in terms of the lion's share of those targets. And they're going to be in the areas of the field where I think that the linebackers are going to have to keep up. So Kemp's been playing rather well. Yeah. But if you saw last week, it seemed like, it seems to me that, against, tight end play, they're going to be able to do some things with that the Houston just may not be ready for.
Yeah, I think, with Howard, you have the potential next to maybe Noah Fant. Noah Fant actually his athleticism translated so that he has the best big play, like make your week at tight end in one play, especially against Detroit right now. But Howard's second on that list. Like tight end's most likely to have a 50-yard reception on Saturday.
No, Jameis, two of Jameis's 3 interceptions in this game will likely come from him trying to anticipate targets over the middle where somebody's dropped in there. But at least two of his 4 touchdowns will probably come from, I don't know if that'll be that many, but 2 of his, I think he'll probably go 3 and 3 this week, and 3 will, 2 of the 3 will be interceptions, 2 of the 3 will be touchdowns, probably in the middle of the field to tight ends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Cameron Brate could catch 10 balls in this game. 8
Oh,
or,
yeah.
I mean, there could be drives where he catches 3 or 4 balls on one drive. So I like them. Last game is the Rams in San Francisco. First time around, and what's neat about all these divisional matchups is we do have a first instance to compare. Now things weren't the same. Can't step in the same river twice and all that. But this game was a 20-7 struggle fest. And I mean, last time we saw the Rams, they were in periodically. If you watch the Rams, they look like one of the worst teams in the NFL. It happened last week. The San Francisco 49ers defense, and you watched the Atlanta San Francisco game, so you got great insight into San Francisco coming into this week, Matt. But it ain't like San Francisco's offense or defense looked tremendous last week. Not like a number 1 seed, and now the number 1 seed is in jeopardy because of that. Not that, I mean, they still had to beat Seattle anyway. So looking at this game, Matt, I mean, I'm not liking Todd Gurley that much. I know he scored twice last week, but you don't want to count on like a guy to get 40 total yards and 2 touchdowns or a touchdown. I'm not liking Woods or Kupp all that much. I'm not liking Goff for sure. He had 78 passing yards in the first matchup. On the San Francisco side, I thought they were going to really take advantage of Atlanta's corners, and Samuel and Sanders did nothing. Jimmy Garoppolo did nothing. George Kittle, well, of course, George Kittle. Even Raheem Mostert feels a little shaky. Like he fumbled in that game, right? And was he going to get 15 touches at the most? So I'm nervous. Like I feel like stepping out on any of the ledges in this game, except for George Kittle. I'm looking down. Am I being too negative?
I think you are with the Rams, and I'll explain why. It certainly the stats seem to bear out that way from the last game, and I get that. But you have to remember that sometime between, I believe, weeks 8 and 11, the Rams figured out, we need to change our scheme because everyone is stopping our run scheme of outside zone, and our linemen can't block it anymore because we've either lost the lineman who could to injury or to free agency. And so then they rolled with 2 rookies. They started going more downhill with more man and gap type of blocking, and that was working out well. And then they committed to Gurley a little bit more as well with that. And it's been up and down. But let's remember, I mean, Todd Gurley is exactly who we talked about him being at the beginning of the year, which is a low-end running back 1, high-end running back 2, who may not be exciting anymore, but he's getting the touches and he's giving you yards in the passing game, yards in the rushing game, and getting you opportunities in the red zone. So for me, I would still probably take the chance on that. Just because I think that there's enough talent, surrounding talent, along with a better offensive line, and more importantly, a blocking scheme that they've switched up from what they did in the past. So they're actually adjusting. Sean McVay, good for you. You know, so I'm a little bit more in that range. And if you look at Goff, I mean, listen, he's had at least 2 touchdowns the past 3 games. He's had 424 yards against a lowly Arizona team, but against Seattle, he had 2 touchdowns and nearly 300 yards. He had nearly 300 yards against Dallas and 2 touchdowns, even though it may be garbage time to an extent. And yes, San Francisco's a good defense, but again, a lot of it has to do with that. And then I'd say in terms of San Francisco on the opposite side of the field, I mean, you may want to, I think there's a point for you with the Rams to maybe lower each of those guys a tier in terms of where their ranking is overall this year and do that. But I don't know if there's anybody that I'd completely wipe off my board from the Rams side of the of the spectrum. And then when it comes to the 49ers, I mean, listen, the Falcons have played better football. So the Falcons defense, Grady Jarrett is probably the second best defensive tackle in football. He's freaking amazing in terms of what he does. And their safeties are healthy. So when the safeties are healthy, that helps out those cornerbacks. For long stretches of time, Atlanta's cornerbacks were rookies who were exposed without good safety play because those guys were hurt. And as a result of that, the defensive backfield was an absolute mess. So the biggest issue we have now is that I believe, I'm trying to remember, Takk McKinley's hurt. He hurt himself, so he may not play. So that'll be an issue. Vic Beasley, Adrian Claiborne. Well, that's from another standpoint. But looking from San Francisco, I'm getting a little dementia here, I think, when I'm veered into Atlanta. But when you look at the 49ers, I think that they will be giving up a little bit to the run. But when you start to talk about maybe, their offense, you know, Mostert gets what's blocked. He's a good back, but really the reason this running game is so good is that there is, in addition to their offensive linemen, the different types of play calls they have a great deal of variety that's unpredictable in terms of their running game. And I'm going to tell you a quick little story about this that I think is compelling. Jay Moyer, who's a Football Guy subscriber and a writer at the RSP, he's coached offensive line play for several years. And he and Ted Wynn had an interaction on Twitter. Ted Wynn writes at The Athletic, wonderful film analyst, one of the best film analysts out there. Well, Ted Wynn has a relationship with Kyle Juszczyk. So Kyle Juszczyk told him on one play, he asked about this, and Kyle said, this was a zone play that we ran, and it just didn't quite work out. It was this long run for Matt Breida, and that was what he was told, and he had analyzed this play. But Jay saw it and looked at the specific blocking of the interior line, and saw that it was actually a counter play, and it's an unusual form of a counter play. And at first, Ted was like, well, Kyle told me this, and this was that and the other. And then, like, the former offensive lineman in the NFL kind of weighed in on this and said, no, that's a draw play. If you look at it, it's a very hard one to tell. But if you look at it, it's this, based on the blocking inside, it's a rare kind of blocking, but this is what they did. And Kyle Juszczyk said it was just a busted play that worked out, because he didn't want any team or anybody watching that to say, oh, they run this kind of counter. We'd rather make it look like a happy accident rather than a planned thing. And the point of this is that San Francisco has such diversity in its run calling and run plays and originality, and how much it depends also on fullbacks and tight ends and wide receivers, that no matter who they put in there, it works out pretty darn well in terms of the running back situation. So Breida's the more talented guy, but Mostert's decent there. I would be worried about the pressure that they can get on that line still, and really the receivers, I think, are going to get some inconsistency. Deebo Samuel, after Kittle's a must play, but after that, Deebo Samuel might be your safest play, even though Sanders has kind of been up and down. You start him, but he's going to have, he's going to face, a pretty darn good corner in Jalen Ramsey at least half the time.
Yeah, they did lose Troy Hill, but I don't see either of these offenses overachieving in this game. Yeah. Let's just put it that way. Yeah. All right. So now we get to kind of the main course here, and I'll go with my tie-dyed optimism. There's a lot of good questions here. Boone or Mostert, and there's actually some other Mostert or questions. Mostert or Gurley. I probably go with Mostert actually, but Mostert or Singletary. And I think with Mostert, you still have the possibility of the rug being pulled out from under you, and how Kyle Shanahan uses his backs. You never know. It's just a risk that other ones don't have. We had. Yeah.
I'll roll with Gurley. I'll roll with Gurley, and then I would roll with probably Mostert, just because with Boone we know that it's dependent upon Cook at this point.
Right. Okay. So, but let's just talk about Boone in these terms, and this is where you can be the wet blanket if necessary. Okay. Let's just talk about Boone as if Cook and Madison are out, and I think that's like 90% likely at this point. I mean, I think Cook is almost 100% likely out, and Mostert is. I mean, and Madison is like 90% out.
Yeah.
So we're looking at Boone and Abdullah and CJ Ham, but you're looking at Boone as the first team running back. He got the first team snaps, right?
Yeah.
I'm exuberant. Right. But this is another psychological thing where I've been stashing, or like Mike Boone's been the last guy on and off of my dynasty rosters all year. And luckily right now, because I had Mostert at the beginning of the year, me complaining now. And I didn't have Mostert by the time he was hitting. Anyway, so some of this is like that rush you get when you feel like a prophecy is being fulfilled. But still, I mean, Mike Boone is an incredible athlete. Mike Boone fits the application of his marriage of skills and physical gifts fits in this offense and what it asks of a running back. We saw a limited sample last week. He looks comfortable and natural. I mean, if you just could let Minnesota running plays wash over you, Cook and Madison and Boone kind of blend into each other, Like you said, it's kind of like we talked about San Francisco, where it's the running game that creates the value and the running back harvests it.
Yeah.
And maybe Cook adds a little bit more juice at the end of his runs than Madison can, Boone's got a lot of juice too, and Boone is running against a tired defense, fresh legs, and not just any fresh legs. Mike Boone's fresh legs. I'm exuberant. Like, I feel like Boone, and oh, by the way, Green Bay is not very good at stopping the run. No. Green Bay can be the kind of team on certain nights that can't get their asses off the field against the run. Remember the Philly game? Yeah. Like, sometimes Green Bay looks like a team that just cannot get off the field. All this stuff to me feels like a perfect storm. Matt, talk me off the ledge.
No, go ahead and jump, because I think this is a good situation. There's a trampoline down below, and it's not that play thing in the office that Michael Scott was going to try and jump and land on. Dalvin Cook had 20 carries for 154 yards against the Packers early in the year.
And the Packers led the game start to finish too.
Yeah. So you have to understand that the way this team is set up is it's set up for Kirk Cousins to work off the play action pass and to be able to work, off of bootlegs and use those types of motion and those types of drops to also set up the screen game and throwback passes. So a lot of their aggressive passing comes off setting up what they do in the run game. And it's not whether they're successful at the run game to do it. It's just that they run the ball enough anyway, and they are successful with it, but they match those things together to be able to get defenses to account for it, so that when they throw the ball, it gives them looks that they have to look at first, that slows down the first step of the pass rush and of the secondary. So Boone's absolutely must play as long as Dalvin Cook doesn't play.
And compare and contrast Boone, because I liked DeAndre Washington coming out of Texas Tech. Don't get me wrong. I was actually optimistic that he could eventually play like a committee back kind of role for Oakland. Didn't totally come to fruition for any number of reasons. And yes, he's ahead of Jalen Richard now, another Matt Waldman favorite. And when I say Matt Waldman favorite, I hope you all know that that's a shorthand for when nobody else, and the name was not on the lips of anybody else in the industry, in draft scouting or anything. One Matt Waldman was saying, this guy, he looks like he can play football. He looks like he's got something he can offer. Jalen Richard, another one of those guys. I'm not convinced there's a big gap between Washington and Richard the way that the touches turned out. No. But Washington's just functional. I mean, he's got some juice, but his footwork and he has no sense of elusiveness, really. He's got a little bit of power that's the main thing with Richard, is he's a little bit smaller and gets swallowed up a little bit easier than Washington does. But neither of them are pile pushers. And so I feel like Boone and DeAndre Washington is the other guy that you're deciding on this week with very limited data.
You go with Boone all the way in this. Certainly with Washington, part of it with Washington too is that, he played on some horrible Raiders teams early on where he just really wasn't going to even have a chance to shine. So he's going to get labeled, and he's looked better this year for sure. But it is a scenario where DeAndre Washington's upside is trying to be, a how would I put it, a subcompact version of James White.
Well, it's because of the number of times that Derek Carr dumps off. DeAndre Washington is not getting all those receptions by design in the offense. He's just there whenever Derek Carr's like, nope, I'm going to dump it off. Yeah. Nope, I want to dump it off. And so with DeAndre Washington, his value could come from volume, like catching 5 or 6 or 7 balls, getting a touchdown. It's the Chargers. Those games can always break into an AFL game. But with Mike Boone, it could be something transcendent. But then there's a limit. So one of the questions I was getting was Boone, and this was in the chat room earlier tonight, Matt. Boone versus Chubb. Another one that the great Santini asked about Boone versus Aaron Jones. So when I get that far, so I say like, I'm going to tell you to play Aaron Jones. I'm going to tell you to play Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb did have 3 touchdowns against Baltimore. Cleveland blew out Baltimore this year. What? Anyway, one of the things, by the way, just as a quick aside to make you laugh, like Cecil and I were talking about this morning about how it's possible that Devlin Hodges could be so bad that the Steelers pull him, but the Steelers still make the playoffs and win those games, and that Paxton Lynch starts a playoff game for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Anyway,
I said it was the football stuff right there.
I said that would be the football gods version of a fart joke. Anyway, so I mean, I'm like, I can't go as far to say Boone over Chubb or Boone over Jones, and yet I know there's like a 20 or 30% chance that Boone could be the better play, at least, and also know that Boone has in him like that 150-yard game that Cook had earlier this year. So when I say Boone versus Chubb or Boone versus Aaron Jones, what say you?
No. And it's
Yeah.
like, and it's one of those things that I get it. I do understand, but it's
It
like,
could end up being right. Like we could, when the scores come in, Boone could outscore those guys.
It's about, again, it's that whole process versus results. And if you're trying to, what are you happy with? And when I look at process, it's like, listen, Nick Chubb, has one offensive lineman who's good, and he still leads the league in yards after contact, and he's the league's leading rusher and one of the best in yards per carry. So why are you going to take that, don't worry about, you can't worry about him and who he faces or what line it is. It's, to me, it's a matter of about how good that player is and what he's proven. And then with Jones, I mean, Jones is up and down. So I get the idea that with Jones, you might want to consider it, but at the end of the day, I mean, you look at him and I think where it comes down to is, what's the quality of that rushing defense? And, last time 23 for 116 and a touchdown when they faced Minnesota in week 1, but he's been, he either gets you over 100 or he gets you under 50. It seems like there's no real in between with his game. And that's probably the biggest problem there. So hello there.
There's no problem when one Cecil Lammey shows up. Da, 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 da.
Hello, everybody. Can you guys hear me now? Am I here?
You're
I'm
here.
Good. Yeah. I'm in the fan studios. I just wrapped up my show. No Thursday Night Football, so it actually meant I was on the air tonight. So I just wanted to say hi to you guys. Matt, I'll be seeing you soon. Bloom, I'll be seeing you soon as well. Whether it's Vegas or Mobile, we got you covered. And before I'm out of here, because we only have a few minutes left, I just want to say thanks to the listening audience. Like, we are very blessed to have this audience, to have the chat room, have the conversations on Twitter, the conversations. And that was my main point tonight, is like, we can talk about everything. We can discuss this great game that we love. We can enjoy each other's company. We can have that shared human experience through this show and through our audience that we've built since 2006. And certainly, having Matt on the show and doing these shows together for years now has been simply fantastic. So wanted to thank you, Bloom, for everything that you do. A Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, of course. Matt Waldman, I mean, you guys are both two of my best friends in the world, man. You guys are both my brothers. And a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everybody. Hugs for everybody, right?
Merry Christmas to you,
and certainly just to send my, good vibes out to the audience as well. And as always, that reminder, because the holidays aren't good for everybody, just pay attention. Pay attention to those, to strangers, just reach out, be kind. And I love the kind of the energy that we have with this show. So good night, fellas. I'm going to go watch Rise of Skywalker, and I hope it doesn't suck.
Good luck.
Enjoy.
We'll see you guys.
We love you.
Love you too.
All right.
Yeah, man.
Wow. And I'll say, because Cecil's not here, I won't make him blush. That because I'm really in one of those modes tonight. Maybe it's because the world's about to end, Matt. Dr. Gene invented something. Cecil, I mean, we're in an idea. We're in a little thought bubble that came out of Cecil's head right now.
It's true.
Cecil, the story of Cecil calling me up and saying, "You like to talk about the draft? Like, you want to talk about the draft and record it?" Yeah, I think we had like 3 hours. We did it like 3 times before we finally got it to take. And Cecil's always had an attitude of the answer's no. If you don't ask, the answer's no anyway.
Yeah.
So just do it. And we could all. Cecil's kind of cherubic, shooting his little arrows and making things happen.
He's absolutely great. I remember when I was at FF Today and writing for them, and I certainly was a great experience, and I still have a close friendship with Mike McGregor over there, who's just an absolutely fantastic figure in this industry, probably one of the hidden figures in this industry compared to the value that he's pumped out in terms of what this industry's been able to exploit. But I was thinking about making a change, and I remember contacting Cecil and saying, do you think football guys would be interested? And he was just, he was so enthusiastic about it. And just, it gave me the kind of energy and confidence to say, yeah, let's pursue this, and let's talk with somebody, and so I always remember that. And just, also just that, and a lot of that was from the sheer fact that you guys were like, hey, here's this crazy person who's also loves the draft as much as we do, and let's talk with him, you know. And I remember thinking, yeah, that clicked right away, and you know, he's absolutely a terrific human being, and it's
positive,
nice for
a catalyst. And you know, obviously I think any of us could have had careers in this area without working with each other, but we never could have had the experience we have had if we didn't end up working together.
Yeah,
and
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no, go ahead.
This is a great show. This is something that it's hard not to look forward to this. You know, and it's just easy, and it's nice that we've been able to build the relationship that we've had over the years. You know, in a way where the rapport, you know, people comment about the rapport all the time, no matter where we go. I think, you know, I know you guys meet people. I meet people who are just like, I love the Audible, and you know, they always are like, tell Bloom and tell Cecil and tell Jene I said hello and how much I appreciate you guys and how much I love the show. And they always ask about you guys and want to talk about that show and how much they like it for the very reasons that we enjoy it. So it's just one of those nice things that it may not be overly scripted. It may not be as, you know, polished on a level of, you know, that you're going to see with some people do, and they do a great job with that. But I think that it rings true. It resonates with our audience, and that's awesome. Appreciate it.
Well, because it resonates with us, because it's something we like to do. And you said someone commented earlier this year and some feedback to us that it's because it seems like we genuinely like each other.
Oh yeah.
And because I don't consume a lot of fantasy football media, I'm like, there are shows that seem like the people don't like each other or can't tell whether they do or not. Anyway, the real joy here is that everybody gives us the opportunity to do this. All the wonderful people in the chat room that have been scrolling by, and you know, I think that we stand for what we stand for with football and our philosophy and approach to that, but also just our way we project ourselves into the world as human beings. And y'all make it easy, make it really easy. Because really I think our Twitter communities, Matt, I think we can both attest to this, that, you know, it's like being part of a bloodstream that's positive. It's not toxic, and it fills us up with energy. And but like you said, the Genesis story, we would be doing this even if we were just doing this for ourselves, because we do enjoy it. But I think that's what we get a lot of people that join us in our audience that love football or love whatever it is they throw themselves into in the same way. So we'll be back Sunday morning. We'll week 16 and championships, and then on to the draft, on to RSP season, on to free agency. The wheel keeps turning. It remains as fascinating and engrossing as ever. We love that you encourage us and let us do something that we would probably do anyway and get to call it a job. It's a great privilege. It's a great pleasure to serve. And everybody for this season, I'll echo a note Cecil says. I know depression very well. So it's about spirits being lifted, but also being there for people and spreading your light however you can.
The best gift you can give to yourself is to give to somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It is a high that you will get.
It is.
So
letting that flow through you, and actually like not having yourself be the center of it, getting out of your ego and things like that. It's great.
And then on the other end, I'll just say this: if you're someone who is in need of receiving something, don't let pride get in the way of that. Be open to receiving. Be open into receiving what people give you. If it's meant in a positive, loving way, be open to that, because also you accepting a gift is also, you're also giving back to them as well. And
absolutely,
you know, and it gives you, and you get a chance to see what a real relationship is about. And so do that. Yeah, no, it's an incredible thing to be connected to somebody. And like I often say, Matt, my advice is always directed back at myself first and foremost, that the biggest mistake we all make is not asking for help enough. Because as you said, when you ask someone for help, you're almost doing them a favor, because I think most of us just really want to have a positive effect in the lives of the people that we care about, and we care about all of you. And we're here and sharing this journey with each other always. Thank you, everybody. Have a great Thursday. Have a great last holiday weekend. We'll continue to be kicking it even through week 17 for those of you that do play week 17 Super Bowls. And then y'all have been all around this trip on the calendar with us many times. We all enjoy it each time, 2020 and beyond.
stay classy.
Cleveland.
2020.